A UK couple's efforts to keep their son alive is provoking sympathy and outrage across the world. The parents of terminally ill baby Charlie Gard say he will be taken off life support at a London children's hospital today. Charlie is 10 months old and suffers from a rare genetic condition. His parents lost a bid to take him to the U.S. for trial therapy earlier in the week. They say the hospital won't allow Charlie to be brought home to die. Joining us now is Dr. Jeanne Mancini, an ethicist with the National Catholic Bioethics Center, which is dedicated to promoting human dignity in healthcare according to the teachings of the Catholic Church. John, what is the Catholic approach to Charlie's story? In other words, how do we apply Catholic teaching to Charlie's case?
Well, the Church gives us a rich moral tradition and some very specific teachings on ordinary and extraordinary treatments. Ordinary basic treatments are obligatory. Extraordinary, very burdensome treatments are not obligatory, but may be chosen by a patient or family under Church teaching. What the Church does not have a specific teaching on, I would say, is the notion of futile treatment. Are there some treatments that are so clearly ineffective or burdensome that no patient or family could ever request them? The Church doesn't have a teaching on that. And it doesn't really have a teaching on what to do in the case of conflict. Church teaching presumes that patients, families, and doctors are going to work together.
Because the conflict here, John, seems to be that the parents, Charlie Gard's parents, don't seem to have a say in all of this. They don't get to decide when and where he dies. What about the rights of the parents in this?
Yeah, I would have to say what strikes me as extraordinary in this case, which is very complex, and I can't say I understand all the details, but what is extraordinary is that where the parents think there is some therapy that does not in itself sound like it is burdensome, painful, or any of that, and where the parents have their own resources, they're not making any claim on the state, that the state would arrogate all the power to itself to decide this. And that is dangerous, I would say, for the state to do that, absent the most clear and compelling evidence of harm being inflicted on a patient. I do think that's extraordinary, and it does seem to come from having a national health service where really the state, there's a foundation for these kinds of claims.
And this can get so complicated considering they were in the UK but seeking treatment in the US. John, what can families who find themselves in this situation or similar situations go for Catholic guidance?
Well, I would say for ethical guidance, the leading source in the United States and probably the world is the National Catholic Bioethics Center, which has a 24/7 hotline, email, and phone. In the UK, there is an Anscombe Center for Bioethics. It's very fine. Parents who find themselves in these conflicts should look for both ethical and legal resources.
Well, I can imagine it'd be tough for any family to work through some of these conflicts, so it's nice to get a Catholic perspective on this. Dr. Jeanne Mancini, an ethicist with the National Catholic Bioethics Center. Thanks so much for breaking it down.
You're welcome.
There's been reaction all over the world to the Charlie Gard case, including at the Vatican. Edward Penton, Rome correspondent for EWTN's National Catholic Register, joins us now. Edward, what has been the reaction to the Charlie Gard case in Italy?
Well, the reaction has been quite strong, perhaps even stronger than in England. I think the people here are very concerned about this case. There's going to be, there is a prayer vigil that's taken place in the British Embassy in Rome. There's a rosary recited here in St. Peter's Square. And I think the great concern is that Charlie Gard is being seen not as a person, but characterized by his illness. And they feel that, and also in particular, that the parents' say in this is not being heard.
Well, what about the Vatican, Edward? What are they saying about the situation?
Well, fairly similar. I mean, in the sense that Archbishop Pallier of the Pontifical Academy for Life has said that the rights of the patient are paramount. But at the same time, quoting a statement from the bishops of England and Wales, he says that there's great complexity in this case, and that the treatment, there shouldn't be aggressive medical treatment applied in this case, which is disproportionate to the illness that's in question. So there is that balance that they're trying to strike. They warn against sensationalism and superficiality in reporting on this case, but at the same time they do say that the interests of the patient should be paramount.
How have those comments been received?
Well, not too bad, but some are concerned that perhaps the rights of the parents aren't being properly upheld. There's concern that the state is being seen as the arbiter in this, and not the parents, who they feel have every right to help the child survive and prolong their life as long as possible. And they feel that, you know, when that's the case, when the parents are mistreating children, then fine, the state should intervene. But when they're trying to prolong a life, then they can't understand why the state's intervening in this case. So they would have liked more emphasis on that, and they're concerned that this could open the floodgates to all sorts of abuses in the future, really carried out by the state, and how the state views the dignity of the human being and not the parent.
Well, I know this is a sensitive case to so many people. It's nice to hear so many in Italy praying for Charlie Gard and his family. Edward Penton, Rome correspondent for EWTN's National Catholic Register. Thanks so much, Edward.
Thank you, Matt.
This week, pro-life leaders joined together in Washington, D.C. to defend the rights of a terminally ill child and his parents. They want the British government to help 11-month-old Charlie Gard, who has a rare genetic disease. Gard's parents want to bring him to the U.S. for treatment, but a London hospital said no, and a U.K. court sided with the hospital. Susan B. Anthony List president Marjorie Dannenfelser tells us this shouldn't be about who is in charge of Charlie. The answer is simple.
And I think you don't have to have an ethics degree or a law degree. You just have to have lived, and you have to have a heart to understand that his parents are the ones who make the decision about life and death for him.
This week, President Trump voiced his support for Charlie and his parents, saying if we can help little Charlie Gard, as per our friends in the UK and the Pope, we would be delighted to do so. The president isn't the only one speaking out about Charlie Gard. Pope Francis is calling for his parents to be allowed to accompany and treat their child until the end. But a statement from another Vatican official is causing some controversy. Archbishop Vincenzo Paglia is the president of the Pontifical Academy for Life, founded by John Paul II to defend and promote human life. Your Excellency, in a statement last week, you said the interests of the patient must be paramount, but you added we must also accept the limits of medicine. So are you standing by the court's decision to take Charlie Gard off life support?
Yes. When the case of little Charlie exploded, the first action as a president of Pontifical Council for Life that I took was to listen to the English bishops who were familiar with the case. Together, we prepared a document in which we ensured the principles with which to judge a situation of such complex nature. No euthanasia, no abandon, no extraordinary measure. Yes, to cure, to accompany, to listen to the desires of Charlie parents.
This week, the Vatican said Pope Francis expressed his own closeness to Charlie's parents and that he's hoping their desire for care is not ignored. That seemed to almost be a reversal in the Vatican's position. Have you talked with Pope Francis about the case?
No, I have not been in contact with the Pope during these days, but I can affirm that the Pontifical Academy for Life has worked in strict agreement with the Pope's staff. The Pope's statement and the Academy's statement address different aspects of the same question. The Academy first presented the applicable general principles, and the Pope then emphasized one of them, that is, the relationship between the patient and his parents, medical personnel, and all who are close to him. It appears that this relationship risks being set aside by the civil authorities in Charlie's case.
Some people are concerned the statement, though, just wasn't sensitive enough to the rights of parents. What would you say to the critics out there?
So the Pope, the Vatican, and all of us must pray for Charlie and its parents. Together we must be vigilant that the rights of Charlie and those of all children are recognized and defended. All human life is sacred and was given to us as a precious and fundamental gift. this is very, very important.
It is an important issue, and obviously continued importance of prayer is also important. Archbishop Vincenzo Paglia, President of the Pontifical Academy for Life, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
The president of the March for Life is expressing support for Charlie Gard and his parents. Jeanne Mancini joins us now in studio. Jeanne, welcome back to the program. You gathered alongside other pro-life leaders today to voice support for Charlie Gard's parents. What are you hoping to achieve?
Well, if you consider what's really going on here, Charlie has this terrible, potentially terminal illness, which is horrific to begin with and tragic, but what makes this so much worse is that his parents are not now allowed to decide how to treat him. So we're hoping and praying that the UK will consider maybe changing him to another hospital in the UK. We understand that the judgment that came down from the European Parliament has some wiggle room, and that the attorney that's actually at this particular hospital, it's the Grand Ormond Street Hospital, has sort of interpreted this in a very, small way. And so we're hoping that at the very least he could be potentially moved to a different hospital and his parents could exercise their freedom of will in deciding how to treat him.
Okay, that makes sense. So a lot of pro-life leaders on board with Charlie's parents. In addition, this week you attended a meeting with Vice President Pence at the White House alongside other pro-life leaders. Tell us a little bit about that meeting.
Sure. And in light of even the Charlie Gard situation, it's important that as we're talking about health care that we consider these most important questions. When does life begin? Who should be able to treat when life ends? What have you? So, of course, we talked about pro-life issues with Vice President Pence and wanting to keep the repeal and replace bill as pro-life as it possibly can be. And, of course, we're all on the exact same page. It's just trying to figure out how exactly to do that now.
It seems like the Trump administration is actively engaging with the pro-life movement. Do you have that same sense?
Oh, without a doubt. They've been just incredible, more pro-life than I ever could have anticipated. Not only keeping promises, but going even further, I would say.
It's an interesting article in a digital magazine, Refinery 29, which published an article about the changing face of the pro-life movement, talking about the growing influence of young women. Tell me, how have you seen the movement change over the years?
Well, I remember CNN running a piece a few years ago saying, the March for Life is not your grandma's march anymore, something like that. And I would say that about the pro-life movement. I mean, it's kind of hip, young, trendy. And the young women, even at the press conference today, the young women primarily that are speaking or that are there in support of these issues are so smart and so articulate and so beautiful, and they've got such a fun kind of perspective on things. And so that article really captured that beautifully.
And like I said, they're not afraid at all to speak out that they are pro-life.
Right.
Jeanne Mancini, President of the March for Life. Thanks so much for being with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
A British court gives the parents of 11-month-old Charlie Gard a chance to present fresh evidence that their terminally ill son should receive experimental treatment. A British hospital wants to take Gard off life support since a genetic disease has left him brain damaged and unable to breathe on his own. But protesters defend the family's right to make those decisions. Pope Francis and President Trump have both shown their support for Charlie. The Vatican Children's Hospital even offered new evidence of a treatment that could help the infant's condition. Charlie's mom just wants to give him a chance.
We're more hopeful now, but obviously we've been through absolute hell, all these court cases, and we want what's best for our son.
The new hearing is set for Thursday, but the judge warned the family they would need new evidence before then, showing that Charlie would benefit from outside treatment. A British court is allowing the parents of 11-month-old Charlie Gard a chance to present fresh evidence that their terminally ill son should receive experimental treatment abroad. But the judge says the evidence has to be new and powerful in order to reverse earlier rulings. Joining us now is Estaphan, whose son has a similar rare genetic disease and was the first to receive treatment here in the U.S. You also advised the Gard family. Welcome to our program.
Thank you so much, Lauren. Pleasure to be here.
What did you say to Charlie's parents as someone who has, as a father, gone through this?
Well, when Connie Yates, Charlie's mom, called us, I told her that I was going to connect her with a doctor who could help Charlie Gard, because he was a premier pediatric specialist on myocardial diseases, and he saved my son's life, and I was very optimistic that he will be able to save Charlie Gard.
Tell us about your son's journey.
So my son, on July 26, 2012, he was diagnosed with a very severe muscular genetic disease called TK2 myochondrial DNA depletion syndrome.
Which is a first cousin,
yes,
basically?
It's a first cousin to Charlie Gard in London. And they told us he will not make it. He only has 2 months to live. Take him home and make him feel comfortable.
And how old is he now?
And now he's 6.5 years old. We prayed a lot. He was born on the feast day of Our Lady of Lourdes. So we had plenty of holy water, and we prayed a lot to her, to Pope John II, to Mother Teresa. We called all of these saints.
You pulled in all the big guns, didn't you?
Guns.
Right. Now, when you're, as a Catholic person, talking to them, did you bring up your faith and your religion in trying to comfort them?
Yes, absolutely. I told them, you know, my wife and I are still semi-sane because of our religion. As I mentioned, we prayed to our Holy Mother a lot. And our son, we called the priest to give him the last rites in November of 2012 because we thought that he wasn't going to be able to make it. But you know what? When after the priest, Father Brown from Loyola University there in Maryland, after he finished the anointing of the sick, he opened his eyes. And the father jumped up and he jumped back. And I said, Father, are you okay? He says, yeah, but you know, he was told that that
nothing could happen, just like they were in the UK. And now they have this new political challenge, this court challenge that they have to face. All of this must be affecting you and your wife.
It is terribly, we're in a state of shock, and we're very anguished because the judge and the doctors there have the best medical plan from the 7 leading international myochondrial specialists, doctors and clinicians. And they still say he should die with dignity because he's suffering. Yet his vital signs are perfect. He's not even needing oxygen. He breathes a room air, and he doesn't need, you know, he's not in pain because otherwise his heart rate would be really elevated. Our son had multiple fractures, which we didn't know because he didn't even have the strength to cry. But his heart rate would elevate to 200.
And this was your son?
This was our son.
And so what you're saying is this isn't
Charlie
even
is
close
normal.
to that condition.
Correct. Charlie is, his heart rate is normal. That's how you know that a baby who's intubated is in pain.
Tell me we have only a short amount of time, but tell me your words, what you can say to this family.
What I have told them is that, you know, they need to stay strong. They're very strong folks because you can imagine their doctors are against them, the hospital is against them, the UK legal system and courts are against them. So they're solid people. And I tell them, stay strong for Charlie, because you're not only going to help Charlie, but you're going to help millions of other, hundreds of other kids around the world. And they know that. And Charlie is a defenseless little baby, but we're working hard to try to see if we choose life, not death.
Thank you so much for joining us with your personal insights. Art Estaphan, your son, and our best to him.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
Thank you.
In court testimony, an American doctor says it's worth trying an experimental therapy to help Charlie Gard. He's the 11-month-old British baby at the center of an international debate. Charlie's parents have been fighting to get treatment in the U.S. for their son, but they've been blocked by the British hospital and courts. The judge today said he won't continue hearing the case unless the American doctor comes to London to see Charlie and meet other healthcare experts. International support for Charlie Gard continues to grow, including right here in Washington. 2 lawmakers are introducing legislation to support the baby boy, and one is Representative Brad Wenstrup of Ohio. He joins me now. Tell me, why did you do this?
Well, I saw that there was a need and an opportunity. It was really a combination of both. Here you have a young infant who has a debilitating disease with the possibility of a cure, but he's being denied. You know, the thing that was really amazing to me is this is against the parents' wishes. The parents' desire to try and establish more treatment, and this is being denied. And what amazes me even more is that this is what doctors are advising. And I think that goes against the grain of what it means to be a doctor, especially if there is a potential opportunity for a cure out there. In many ways, this is personal to me because of a family experience.
Well, tell me more about that, your personal story that inspired you to write the legislation.
Well, about 23 years ago, my sister, at 26 years old, I was 36, she developed leukemia. And the doctors told her that without treatment, she was going to die, and even with treatment she might, but her best chance is with a bone marrow transplant. When it came time to do a bone marrow transplant, her insurance company said it was experimental, and we're not going to allow that. Her doctors didn't advise that. They suggested she do it and go to Seattle to do it, which we did. It's now 23 years later. She is a wife, a mother of 2, and is doing very well. So to hear that this is experimental and shouldn't be tried really bothered me.
In court today, the family had a lot of difficulty, and they walked out at one point. They're very upset. What do you think the outcome is going to be, based on the fact that the judge has already said Charlie Gard must die?
Yeah, I find that unbelievable that that's the decision they would make against a patient or against a patient's parents in this case, when there is an outside chance of hope or a chance of hope. That really is intriguing to me. And although these doctors may be very brilliant in many ways, I think that we are better served with the notion that a cure begins with one. And if we never try, we're never going to get a cure. And Charlie has this opportunity. And it's, you know, as I told my sister when she was sick and they were including her in studies and she was asking me whether she should be in them, I said, yes, you should be. And somebody was in studies before you, and that's why you have a fighting chance today. This child has a fighting chance, and we should give that to him. And they're raising the money privately to be able to do it.
Thank you so much for joining us, Congressman Brad Wenstrup of Ohio. And that does it for us at EWTN News Nightly. To all of you around the world, I'm Lauren Ashburn. Good night, and God bless you.
An American doctor who specializes in genetic conditions will travel to Britain next week to assess Charlie Gard. The 11-month-old baby's family is in a legal battle with a British hospital over whether trying an experimental treatment is Charlie's best interest. The hospital wants to end treatment without letting the parents decide. Now a judge says he's open-minded to new evidence from the physician from Columbia University. The case attracted international attention after President Trump and Pope Francis weighed in. Joining us now is Carter Sneed, professor of law and political science at the University of Notre Dame. He's also director of the Center for Ethics and Culture and served as general counsel to President George W. Bush's Council on Bioethics. So, Carter, you wrote an op-ed for CNN entitled "Why Pope Francis is Fighting for Charlie Gard." Can you summarize the points you make?
Certainly. Pope Francis has joined Charlie Gard's parents in resisting the United Kingdom's court system, along with the hospital, to refuse his transfer for an experimental therapy, and most importantly, to terminate his life-sustaining measures, namely his ventilator, because the courts and the state have judged his life to be no longer worth living because of brain damage that they believe is irreversible. Pope Francis and Charlie's parents, on the other hand, really would like to pursue whatever options they might be able to relieve his symptoms, but more importantly, resist the idea that just because Charlie is looking at possibly at being cognitively disabled, that his life is no longer worth living, and therefore we should act with the intention of ending that life.
Well, you mentioned unduly burdensome. Let's take a closer look at that and the point that you wrote. You said, so long as there is a medical intervention available that is not unduly burdensome and will benefit the patients that Charlie is, not who we should wish him to be, we should do our best to see that Charlie and patients like him receive it. Why do you believe the temptation of death, in a sense, is greater than life, and how this sort of plays into the culture of death?
What we're seeing in this case is a strong temptation, and it's, I think, a well-meaning temptation in a kind of compassionate stance to try to relieve someone's suffering by eliminating their life. And that's something that that's a temptation we should resist. We should always distinguish between an intervention, a medical intervention, that is unduly burdensome, that is one that causes pain or discomfort or a whole variety of other burdens might be possible, and a person's underlying condition.
Is Charlie's case a warning as to what is to come if we don't safeguard ethics in medicine?
I do believe that's correct. Again, there's a natural temptation rooted in compassion to terminate the life of someone who is suffering as a means of terminating their suffering. But in this case, you see, especially in the court decisions, a real focus on cognitive functioning, cognitive functioning as the standard for a life worth living. And we don't believe that a person's value is reducible to their cognitive functioning. And we have to defend folks who are disabled. And the only way to do that is to draw firm distinctions between interventions that might be burdensome or futile and a life that is difficult and is characterized by suffering.
Well, I know that on a surface level, this can seem pretty complicated, so it's really nice to get a Catholic approach to this, and you're being able to explain the value of life. Carter Sneed, Professor of Law and Political Science at the University of Notre Dame, thanks so much for talking with us.
My pleasure.
Vatican.
American doctor who says he'll examine Charlie Gard arrives in the UK. A hospital spokesperson confirmed that the doctor, who's working on an experimental gene therapy, visited the hospital this morning, but wouldn't confirm if he saw the 11-month-old who suffers from a terminal condition. His parents are fighting to keep him on life support to bring him to the U.S. The family has received the support of Pope Francis and President Trump. Pope